Hi everyone, my name is Ryan E. Barba from Detailed Industrial Arts, and I'll be discussing the global economy and market integration. The global economy includes economic history, economic structure, and globalization. Economic globalization is a historical process representing the result of human innovation and technological progress. Globalization didn't happen overnight. It developed over time because of human inventions and new technologies that connected countries more closely. For example, OFWs are a product of globalization. Filipinos can work abroad because of better transportation and communication. Historical process. It had its beginning in 1896 and reached its peak in 1914. Globalization started in the late 1800s and expanded rapidly until World War I disrupted it. Similar to how today's e-commerce boomed during COVID-19 but slowed down due to restrictions and supply chain issues. Human innovation. Scientific revolution and industrial revolution. Discoveries of electricity, machines, steam engines made mass production and faster travel possible. Technological progress, transportation, communication. It is characterized by the increasing integration of economies around the world through the movement of goods, services, and capital across borders. Online banking apps like GCash or PayPal allow instant remittances from abroad, increasing integration, increased trade supercomputers. Countries are connected because of money, products, and services can move freely across nations. OFWs provide service abroad while spending money or sending money home, boosting the Philippines economy. High-frequency trading. Millions of stocks purchases and sales between different cities in a matter of seconds. Trade is faster and bigger than ever. Technology like supercomputers allow millions of financial transactions in seconds. For example, Lazada or Shopee processes thousands of orders every second across the country. Markets also trade billions daily with just a click. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from my discussion.
These changes are the product of people, organization, institution, and technologies. So this statement means that the big changes in the global economy happen is not on their own, but because of these four things. So this is the people, the organization, the institution, and the technologies. So the people, for example, like the individuals like mga inventors, mga workers, mga business leaders who came up with the new ideas to make things happen. So next is the organization. So the organization is the companies and groups nga ga-produce og goods, ga-offer og mga services, and also ga-trade with others. So next is the institution. So ang institution mao ni siya ang rules, ang law, og ang system like mga banks or government nga ga-help mao ni sila ang ga-help mag-manage og mag-guide sa global economy. So last is the technologies. So ang technologies like mga internets, mga airplanes, mga cargo ship nga mao na sila ang kanang way nga ga-deliver sa tong mga goods or mga services. So and also kanang computer nga ga-help nga makonekta sa globally. So which enable faster, cheaper, and more efficient ways to produce and exchange goods and services globally. Critical to economic globalization is global economic integration. Economic integration means that separate production operations are functionally related to each other and form a unified production or service. This requires efficient management of economic operations from different parts of the world. So, ang economic integration meaning, ang businesses nga sa lain-laing country is ga-work sila together para maka-obra sila og kanang product or services. Like for example, abi ang one part sa product might be in one country while ang another part naman niya is somewhere else. So, for example, abi ang smartphone. So, ang smartphone, ang iyahang software is na-develop sa US. Tapos iyahan namang hardware is na produce sa China. Tapos iyahan namang mga semiconductors is na assemble sa kanang South Korea. So mauna siya ang economic integration kanang lain-lain nga aga magka-collab sila ba. So this kind of global teamwork is an important part of economic globalization. To make it work well, and companies need to manage their operation efficiently in many different countries. In current times, this is made possible by innovation in transport logistics, modernization of communication and transport system, policy supporting integration of different processes along the globe, among others. So nowadays, ang mga countries and businesses around the world kay dali na sila maka-work together because of the improvement in transport and communication. Like ang goods can be moved faster and more efficiently due to the better road, ships, planes, and system for tracking deliveries. So ang mga people, dali na po sila makashare silang information using phones, the internet, and the other modern tools. So and also ang government, tungod sa ilang giobra nga mga rules or law or agreement, naka-help siya nga make the trade cooperation between countries smoother.
I am Julian Ader Mudo, and to be continued, I will be discussing about the problems arising due to economic development. First problem, the poor nations and the people who inhabit them were and are subjugated by the operations of the global economy. In the global economy, the wealthier countries and powerful corporations often the one nga ga-control sa mga rules, finance system, and production, while the poor countries have to follow these rules even though they don't benefit from them. For example, if poor countries are often forced to export their raw materials like oil or coffee at low prices, while rich countries sell expensive finished product from that raw materials, of course, dako nga profit ang mabalik sa ila even though gamay nga kapital ang ila napagwa. Bali ang gwa is that ang pigado is mas gapigado while ang manggaranon is mas gamanggaranon. The impact of this is that people remain stuck in poverty even though they work so hard because, of course, they don't have a choice. They also want money in order to buy some food to survive everyday lives. Second problem, not all parts of the world gained equally from the growth of the global economy. The global economic development has made some regions, like Western Europe and other parts of East Asia, consider that they are very rich, but others like Sub-Saharan Africa and rural parts in Latin America have seen much slower progress or even decline. For example, the country of China, they have created a lot of machines. They can keep up with the trends and also have a lot of infrastructures, while in Sub-Saharan Africa, still struggled even in a basic infrastructure, and they are lack in electricity and even in clean water. The impact of this is that some people enjoy modern technology and wealth, while others remain in poverty. The third problem, within nations, the poor tended to suffer most when those nations are forced to repay their debts to other, more developed nations. So, when poor countries borrow money from rich countries or institutions, they must to repay it, often with interest. To do this, they are forced to cut government spending. Like for example, if ang poor countries is lubog sa utang, it may cut spending on hospital, schools, or social welfare program. This affect poor people, especially those who rely lang sa mga public services. The last problem we have, the global economy was not equally good for everyone and was bad for many. The quote means that the global economy has helped some people but hurt many others. Not everyone has benefited equally, and some has suffered losses such as job losses or economic instability. For example, A local farmer in a poor country grows rice and sells it in their community, but then rice from other countries is imported and sold at a cheaper price. The local farmer can compete with the low price, so they can't sell rice anymore, and this can lead to the farmer losing their business and livelihood.
The global economic structure. A good place to get a quick snapshot of a global trade as well as net economic flows in and out of a nation state is by looking at its trade surpluses and trade deficits. One of the easiest way to know paano ga-flow ang money in and out in a country is to look sa ilang trade surplus and trade deficit. So what is trade surplus and trade deficit? A trade surplus, a surplus in the balance of trade, occurs when the value of a country's export exceeds that of its imports. A trade deficit, also called a trade gap, occurs when imports exceeds exports. So when we say trade surplus, it means that a country is more on export than imports. So when we say export, it means that they are more on selling products, goods, and services to other countries than imports. In short, they are the net seller. Then the trade deficit is the opposite of trade surplus. The trade deficit is more on imports than exports. When we say imports, it means that they are buying more products and goods from other countries. In short, they are the net buyer. So why countries imports goods and products from other countries? So one of the reasons why countries is importing goods and products from other countries is because kulang ang ilang supply. For example, in the Philippines, if kulang ang supply sa Philippines, ang Philippines is gaangkat og rice sa ibang bansa. Of special interest and importance are the position of two global economic giants, the US and China. The US and China have an important role in terms of a global economy. So the US and China are the perfect example of trade plus and trade deficit. The US as a trade deficit and China as a trade surplus. So in 2023, the US around 797 billion US dollars ang ilahang na trade deficit in 2023. In that 797 billion US dollars, ang ilan na trade deficit with China is around 300 billion US dollars. So ang China naman, in the first 7 months of 2025, ang ilahang na trade surplus is around 683 billion US dollars. So the trade relationship between the US and China reflects that China is a net seller or more on exporter, then the US is the consumer or the importer.
Good evening once again, I am Heinzel Aifo, and this time I'll be discussing the actors that facilitates economic globalization. So globalization has opened the doors for other non-state authority and actors in driving economic globalization. Non-state actors include the international economic organizations, private sector led by multinational companies, central banks, and the civil society. So economic globalization is the increasing connection of world economies, pag-isip trades, investments, technology, labor, and etc. But it is not just because of the government, or it is not just the government making this happen. May araman kita ginatawag ng mga non-state actors, which also play a very big role in pushing economic globalization forward. So what is International Economic Organization? So the International Economic Organization is a group or institution formed by many countries para mag-guide, mag-regulate, and mag-support sa world economy. And they were mostly created after the World War II para ma-avoid ang another economic crisis. And this institution also create and promote policies, especially mga neoliberal policies, which encourage free trades, open markets, and less restrictions in businesses. So neoliberalism, it's more on the market handles it and not the government. So less government control. So the international economic organizations includes the IMF or the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the OECD or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So first, let's discuss the IMF. So ang IMF or International Monetary Fund, isa ni siya ka organization na naga-help sa mga countries na naga-face financial trouble or crisis by providing loans or emergency funds. So just like, for example, may isa ka country na may utang na hindi na kaya mabayaran or closer na to bankruptcy, the IMF provides emergency funds. Next naman is ang World Bank. So, ang World Bank naman, nag-focus na siya sa mga long-term projects or long-term loans. Nag-provide naman siya funds para sa construction sa mga roads, schools, hospitals, and etc. sa mga poorer countries. So, by funding these infrastructures, the World Bank help countries na mag-grow and connect with the world. So next is the OECD or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Ang OECD naman is a club of mga rich and developed countries who decided to work together. So just like a study group of countries, they compare their notes, they share ideas and strategies, and also they give advice to each other and sa iban lang ng mga countries. And unlike sa IMF kag sa World Bank, ang OECD naman niya, wala na siya nag-loan. Instead, nag-provide ni siya guidelines and recommendations which encourage countries to open their markets, to reduce trade barriers, and also to promote globalization. So, if may isa ka country nga nakakam up way on how to improve their school systems or on how to create jobs, the OECD might study it and i-recommend niya sa ibang countries to do something similar. So, next is the regional organization. So, ang regional organization is a group of neighboring countries who decided to work together to help each other. So by working together, they can share resources, reduce trade barriers, and solve problems faster. Just like a barkada or group of friends who decided to work together to help each other, but just like by sharing notes, foods, money, and etc. So everyone can benefit. So instead of competing alone, they help each other para mag-grow sila together and also to support each other. So the regional organizations includes the ASEAN or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the NAFTA or the North American Free Trade Agreement. So the ASEAN or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations is a group of Southeast Asian countries including the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and many more. So, ang main goals ng ASEAN is to promote peace, economic growth, and cooperation in the region. And in terms of globalization, the ASEAN works to remove trade barriers and encourage investment. It also allows the flow of goods across the Southeast Asia. So it makes it easier for Southeast Asian countries to buy and sell goods with less hassle. So next is the NAFTA. Ang NAFTA naman or the North American Free Trade Agreement is a trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. And it was updated sa 2020 into USMCA or the United States Mexico-Canada Agreement. So, ang goal naman sa NAFTA is to make trades cheaper and to remove tariffs. When we say tariffs, ano siyang mga taxes kung mag-import and export kita sa mga goods sa iban nga country. So, ang ASEAN is gonna help yung mga countries sa Southeast Asia na mag-grow, while ang NAFTA naman is it makes the trade cheaper across the North America. So both shows how regional organizations connect countries and promote globalization.
So, bright morning, everyone. So, I will continue the reporting of my group mates. So, my topic is multinational companies, or MNCs. They are considered to be the main carriers of economic globalization. So, what are the examples of multinational companies? So, we have Google's, the Apple, the Meta AI, the Microsoft, Netflix, Tesla, Uber, Coca-Cola, the Toyota, any company that makita mo sa different countries, kag may ara sila big nga impact sa sino nga country. So global, first is global investment. So MNS set up factories, branches, and offices in different countries, bringing capital and technology. So these are mga companies nga mga dagko na bala kaayo, like for example the Google. So they invest in that country, tukod sila sang ila branches in ang country so that they can share their technology, share the knowledge, or share the skills they have. So next kung nag-open sila sang mga branch or companies sa mga country, so syempre if ma-open, so kinahanglan nila mga tao, so they create a job. So they a job creation. They employ people worldwide, spreading skills and knowledge. So as their own, like example Amazon, so need that sang mga people to baga arang isipad-sipad bala or kinahanglan bala ang order sa sining lugar, ang order sa piyak nga lugar, mga sorting. So they need to employ people worldwide. So they will teach how to do mga kinahanglan nila himuon to meet their job descriptions. Number 3 is flow of goods and services. By producing and selling internationally, they make products available in many markets. For example, that is Coca-Cola, Apple, and Toyota, and other different Apple, Toyota, mga cellphone brand like Samsung. So by producing and selling internationally, so they flow and they have their products na makilala kag magamit sa ibang nga mga tao sa sinang lugar. Next is technology transfer. Not only the knowledge or the understanding sa ilang obra, but they will teach skills to understand and to use the technology, especially sa mga generations. So pertinagid ka advance sa mga technology sa aton subong. So they introduced modern technology in management practices in developing nation. So not only in their own companies, but they developing the nation through technology transfer. So next is cultural exchange. So MNCs, or multinational companies, they promote cultural globalization by spreading global brands, lifestyles, and consumer habits. So not only nga maka-generate sila job creation sa lugar, but to promote their global brands. So makilala sang iban nga mga nations, makilala sa iban nga country. So mainggan nyo nga mag-open ang country for investment and for that company. So next is the central banks. they are considered as one of the most powerful institution in the world economy since they can lead economic development. So yes, they can lead development. So because first, they control of monetary policy. They regulate interest rates and money supply, influencing inflation, investment, and spending. So, syempre, they control the money. They control the money of the nation, and they teach how to use it properly, spending it properly, and they teach how to invest it properly sa mga business or to avoid inflation, meaning pagtaas ng mga balaklon. Number 2, economic stability. By managing inflation and preventing financial crisis, they safeguard the economy. So, muna, by managing inflation, so one of their task is to managing inflation. So, gina-teach nila ang mga tao sa pag-prevent sa financial crisis. Gina-safeguard nila ang economy. Next is currency management. They control exchange rates and foreign reserves affecting international trade. So, meaning, mga foreign money, so sa aton, sample dollars, so magtaas ang dollar, syempre gataas man ang value yadi. So, example, butang ta 60 pesos ang $1. So, magnubo ang dollars, syempre manubo man di. So, they are the one who control the exchange rates. The bank are the one who control the exchange rates and foreign reserves. So, number 4 is supporting for growth. Through loans, credit policies, and financial regulation, they can stimulate economic development. So, meaning of this is through loans. So, hindi man sila ng loans like bad loans being hindi mo bayaran ng loans, but they teach how to develop through loans nga makabulig man sa country and makabulig man sa certain person, the credit policies and financial regulation. So may ara ang bangko sa mga rules and regulation nga dapat sundon to stimulate economic development. So the last is global civil society. So this as a major driver of economic globalization, the global civil society has made its mark in global development arena, particularly during the UN or the United Conference of Environment, and developed in 1992. Global civil society seen as either composed of individuals or groups of individuals disadvantaged by the effects of the globalization of the world economy. They protest and seek alternatives, while on the other hand, global social movement constituting a basis for an alternative to a new world order. So global service society is a major driver of economic globalization. Why? Because the global civil society refers to individuals, organizations, and social movements that operate beyond national borders or to influence global issues. So meaning, kung example, nag-meeting to ang mga global civil society sa UN, so sila, kumbaga sila ang voice sang nation. So sila ang voice sang country. Like, i-open up to nila ang mga certain problems nga nakaapektuhan subong ang bansa naton or ang ibang nga lugar. So gina-open na to nila. So may ara gid representative to understand into to get some information kung ano ba lang kalatabo sa ibang lugar, ano ga kalatabo sa aton, ma-share to nila. So it plays an important role in shaping economic globalization by ensuring that development is more just as sustainable. So what are the actors or what are the representative? So NGOs, I'm not mistaken, National Government Offices, NGOs. So, national government organization. So, the professional associations, what are their role? So, they asked watchdog advocates and partnership in shaping policies, holding government and corporation accountable, and promoting alternatives to dominant system. So, example, Amnesty International, Greenpeace, International Red Cross, the World Wildlife Fund, and global social movement like Climate Justice Campaign. So, what are the impacts? So, they influence international institutions like the UN, the World Bank, mobilize public opinion, and provide aid and services in areas where states or markets face. So, sila gid ang ang representative. So, sila ang naghahambal to kung ano ang nakalatabo sa market sa certain countries. So, in short, global civil society is the voice of the people at the international level, giving citizen influence in a world increasingly shaped by globalization. So, that is my report. Thank you everyone for listening. Bye-bye.
Now let us discuss and understand what is a Wallerstein modern world system theory. So this theory helps us understand why some countries are rich, powerful, and technologically advanced, while some other countries remain poor and dependent. This explains global inequalities through the structure of a single capitalist world economy. Before we dive deeper into the Wallerstein's modern world system theory, let us first know who is Emanuel Wallerstein. So Emanuel Wallerstein is an American sociologist who lives from 1930 to 2019. He was the one who introduced the world system theory in 1974 through his book, The Modern World System. So the main goal of Wallerstein was to explain why wealth and power are unevenly distributed throughout the world. So instead of looking at each country separately, Wallerstein studied the entire world as the interconnected system, which means that he saw the world as the he saw the countries as the country that needs each other to be interconnected. Now let us discuss what is the Wallerstein's modern world system theory. In Wallerstein's modern world system theory, Wallerstein sees the world system as interdependence. The world system is the result of the interdependence of cultures and ecosystems that were once relatively isolated by the distance and boundaries, which means that Emanuel Wallerstein argued that no country develops alone. Instead, every nation is part of a global network of interdependence, which means that every country needs each other country enabled for them to survive. Well, for example, in the global market, a smartphone example, for example, this smartphone that we have right now, some of its parts or some of its what do you call this? Some of its part or the materials that is being used to create a smartphone came from Korea, Japan, or China. So and then while the software that is used to develop that particular software in that particular smartphone came from the United States. Then, the raw materials being used to create the smartphone, such as cobalt, came from the Africa. So, this kind of connectedness or this kind of trade shows that the nation depends on one another for resources, the technology, and the labor. Next is that the Wallerstein says that the world system is self-contained and has boundaries. So, Wallerstein argued that the modern world system theory explains that the world system are self-contained, which means that they work within the certain boundaries, whether in political, the cultural, and especially in economic. Importantly, so every system has a lifespan. It myrises, it dominates for a time, then eventually declines or get replaced. So, which means that the system that we have right now is not permanent. It can end. It can be it can rise to the top. It can dominate the markets, but it will eventually decline and will get replaced by some other system. For example, the European feudal system gave way to capitalism. Then one day our capitalisms may also transform into something new. Next is the world system theory. The world system are not unique today. So once the world system have existed before and not unique features of the contemporary world, which means that the systems that we have here, as a example, the capitalism that we have here is the only part of the many many system that we have in our history. For an instance, in the past, the Roman Empire created a system which they conquer our regions, where they tied the regions together by taxes, trades, and military controls. While if we are going to talk about today, we use the economic growth and the public market dominations, which means that we focus on profits. The past systems were based on military and political domination. What does it mean? So, in the past, the systems that binds together was based on political and military. As I was saying earlier, in the past, they use political and military domination to create a system. While now, we use a capitalism or economic growth or global market to dominate the system. What does it mean? So, example, uh, in today's generation or today's modern world system, we use the market or public. We use the market to dominate the countries. We use the example, the countries are ga gamas sila sa market. They are using the market to earn profits. So they compete in a market not for the trade, not for the power, but not for the military power or the political power, but they trade and compete in the market for the technology and for technology, resources, and other things, only to gain profit. That's the difference between the past and the present system that we have now. Next is that the modern world system is also known as the capitalist world system. The modern world system is known as modern capitalist system, a system which relies on economic domination. So this means that countries, as I was saying earlier, the countries compete and cooperate in the market, where their main goal is profit, not for military or political power. So the wealthy nations dominates the global trades by controlling the industry, technologies, finance, while the poorer nations are left dependent on them. For example, in the market, the Japan and the United States dominates the technology and the finance in the market, while the Philippines and some countries in Asia were just dependent on them because we cannot catch up with the technology that they were innovating or they were developing. Next is the hierarchical world system. The hierarchy in the world system. We have the core, the semi-periphery, and the periphery. The world system is arranged according to the influence. The core, which is the most dominant, to semi-periphery, to periphery, the least dominant. So, as you can see in the triangle or the table, we have the core, the semi-periphery, and the periphery. The core is the dominant, economically diverse, and the technologically advanced countries. The semi-periphery is the intermediate countries with moderate industrializations, and the periphery is the less economically developed and reliant on exporting the materials. So, in the In the modern world system, Wallerstein divided the world into three categories. We have the core nations, the semi-periphery nations, and the periphery nations. In the core nations, we have the richest and the most technologically advanced, such as the United States, the Germany, and the Japan. While the semi-periphery nations are the nations that are developing, the developing countries like Brazil, India, and South Africa. So they are in the middle. They sometimes exploit foreign nations, but they sometimes are being exploited by the core nations. Next, we have the periphery nation. They are the most poorest countries, often in Africa and other parts of Asia, such as Philippines. So we depends on agriculture, the raw materials, and the cheap labors, and we rely heavily on the core for manufactured goods. So, for example, the cobalt that we use for smartphones batteries were mines on the countries, on the periphery countries. Example, in Congo, which is a very poor country. Uh, they are the example of periphery. Then we process the cobalt that is used that is being used for the batteries of smartphones in China, which is a semi-periphery country. Then we use the iPhone designed and sold in the by the Apple in the US, which is the core country. So this is how the cycle works. They are connected with each other. In conclusion, the Wallerstein's modern world system theory teaches us that the world is not made up of isolated countries, not one by one countries, not alone or independent countries, but one big capitalist economies, meaning we are all interconnected. The core nation dominates, the semi-periphery balance in between, and the periphery nations remains dependent on the two. Then the hierarchy explains why global inequality persists and why wealth and technology are concentrated in few powerful countries.
Right, morning everyone. In this juncture, we will be discussing about the three level of hierarchies of the nations. These are the core, the semi-periphery, and the periphery. But before that, let us first take a look at this picture that's pasted and shown here on the screen. Okay, so now let's first discuss the core nation. So the core nation consists of the strongest and the most powerful nations in which technology is advanced. Capital intensive products are produced and exported to the semi-periphery and the periphery. So in short, the core nation is the most powerful and wealthy. They have advanced technology, industries, and military as well. So they export high-value products like cars, electronics, and medicines, and import cheap raw materials. So example of these nations are United States, Canada, Japan, Germany, United Kingdom, and France. So the core nation is highly developed. Kumbaga, advanced sa katama. They are industrialized and economically dominant from other countries. Nations. To add up, the core nations, they are the wealthiest centers of power and that dominate and exploit semi-periphery and periphery nations for resources, markets, and labors. Now, we have here the semi-periphery nations. So, the semi-periphery consists of industrialized third world nations that lack the power rather, and economic dominance of the core nations, some were exploiting and exploited. So these are the countries that are in between in core and periphery, often transitioning or balancing both roles. So the semi-periphery nation, they are industrialized but not as powerful as the core. So industrialized siya tuod pero hindi sa powerful as the core. So these nations are in between. So ara lang sa tunga, they are not powerful and they are not that weak as well. So they import technology, export some manufactured good. So the semi-periphery nation, they are moderate industrialization and economic development. So they depend on core nations but also exploit to the periphery nations. So depend lang sa core nation pero gaano man sa periphery. The countries that are included here in semi-periphery nations are China, like India, Brazil, Mexico, South America, and as well as the Philippines. So if you were asking where did the Philippines belong, so we belong in the semi-periphery nations. We are in the industrialized third world nation. Now we have the periphery nation. So the periphery nation consists of nations whose economic activities are less mechanized and are primarily concerned with exporting raw materials and agricultural goods to the core and the semi-periphery. So the periphery nation, they are least developed. So kumbaga, they are the poor nation. They have a weak industrialized and economically dependent to other nations. Periphery nation often lead to poverty because of unfair transactions. Periphery nations, they only rely on agriculture and exporting raw materials. So export siya raw materials from their nations, which is the periphery, to the core and the semi-periphery. They also have low wages, poor infrastructure, and weak institution. They have political instability, poverty, as what I have mentioned, and as well as the inequality. Okay, so many countries in sub-Saharan Africa are included in these nations. Parts of Southeast Asia, Latin America, and South Asian nations like Afghanistan or Nepal. So, the role of periphery nations is they solely provide cheap labor, raw materials, and markets for core nations and the semi-periphery nations, but remain stuck in underdevelopment. So, provide sa tuod raw materials, but in a cheap labor. So that's why these nations often develop they are not developed, they are undeveloped. So we have here the flow of resources. As you can see on the right side, we have here the periphery, semi-periphery, and core. So from periphery to semi-periphery and core. So what flows out from periphery? So as you can see, raw materials. These raw materials includes minerals, oils, agricultural products, and timbers at a cheap labor. The impact to this is that the periphery nations lose natural wealth and remain independent. So since sila goods, gakawala, or gakadula ang ilang natural wealth, but they tend to remain dependent from the core. Now the second one is the semi-periphery. So from semi-periphery to core. The flow is that manufactured goods like cars, electronics, steel, and textile are given to the core. The impact to this is that the semi-periphery act as the factory floor for the core economies. And the last one is the core. So from core to semi-periphery and periphery. So the core nations have high value finished products like cars, airplanes, medicines, and luxury goods. So the capital and investment, so high profit good, as what I have mentioned. So the core nations dominate trades because they sell expensive and finished goods while buying cheap raw materials from the periphery. Let's go to the simple analogy. The core, which is the factory, so the core makes the expensive goods, and the semi-periphery is the workshop, so they are developing in between, and the periphery is they are the farmer or the mine for supply. The three level of hierarchies explains a global inequality. Core nations control wealth and technology. Semi-periphery acts as a buffer zone, and the periphery remains dependent and less developed.